What's up, y'all? Welcome to my growing up series. Last time I talked about the general aspects of my childhood, mostly pretty positive, right? This time we are going to talk about the more dark side of my growing up. Growing up for me was not perfect. It was not this happy ever after, perfect little childhood where nothing went wrong and everything went right. Um, but it wasn't absolute chaos either. So this time we're going to get into some of the problems. The first problem is my mother. At face value, that's like funny, like, oh my God, it's just your mother. But no, my mother actually has some serious issues. For starters, she is an addict. She is a drug addict. Um, it's kind of a long story as how she kind of descended into that, but I'll give you like a brief, light little overview of the story. So when I was like really young, like between the ages of like, 0 to like 6, my mother was a nurse. That was her like career path. She was a nurse. But she suffered an injury, like a back injury that caused her to lose that job because she never like fully recovered. But then also she kind of got super lazy with it, right? Like maybe she didn't fully recover, but she kept using the excuse of her back to not like get back to work. Throughout that time, she went through a lot. For example, her mother passed away around that same time. And around that time, I was like 5 or 6 years old. So then she also fell into like a terrible depression, right? She couldn't work. She had this injury. Someone really, really close to her had passed away. So through all of that, somehow she has like trickled down the financial stability ladder in the sense that we went from living in a really big house, actually. I remember it still, even though it was like at a really young age. It was a huge house, but we ended up losing that house. We ended up moving into apartments, and over the years, slowly, my relatives kind of moved away. But at that same time, she got into drugs. Now, I don't know the specifics because I was pretty young around that age, but that was part of the reason my older relatives were moving away. When we got to the point where it was just my brothers, me, and her, it was a serious issue. She would ask me to babysit so she can go out, and when she'd go out, she'd come back high. And there were also days where she would be like in her room because my brothers and I would share a room, but she had a room to herself. And there were days where she would lock herself in the room for like long periods of time. And if we like knocked or tried to check on her or talk to her or anything, she gave us like a really weird vibe. And now that I'm older, I know like she was high, like on some weird stuff. So that led into the foster care system. Because of this behavior and her issues with being financially stable, eventually Child Protective Services got a hold of us. There's this rumor in my like older family circle that it was actually my best friend's family, and I don't know, and I really don't care to find out because I understand that that was really the best situation for us. We were not in a happy, healthy relationship with our mother, me and my brothers. She was psychologically abusive, emotionally abusive, and slightly physically abusive. She would, how some people think you should punish your kids by, spankings and um, you know, that's debatable on whether spankings and physical punishment is too bad for kids, but if you do it, there's definitely a line, right? There is obviously a way too far. And for her, it was way too far. It wasn't just a spanking. For her, it really wasn't just a spanking. They were like really rough, really aggressive, and and excessive. I mean, it wasn't like a couple taps, but it was like going at it. Like, not me, because around that time when that started, I was a bit older. I was like 10, between 10 and 12. And so around that age, like, she just didn't try that. And especially if she did, and I got the confidence to like stand up to her, that would actually be something. But my younger brothers, they were like 6, they were like 3, you know what I'm saying? And they were getting it way harder than they should have. So as you can see, my childhood had its ups and its downs. I definitely found the bright side throughout it all, but I think I hate to say it, but the worst part might have just been my mother, you know what I'm saying? The other worst aspect to it is kind of like my family abandoning us. I think they really just abandoned my mother, and since we're her kids and her responsibility, we were just left with her, even though she was such a problem. When we went into foster care, two of my brothers went to a different foster home than me and one of my brother. The brother who's directly under me, 6 years younger, we went to one foster home under this lady named Miss Michelle. R.I.P. Rest in peace. She is now deceased. And then my other two brothers went to another lady that they are still with today. She ended up adopting them. They're like 15 and 12 or 13, something like that. So they're still very much minors living their best life. Me, I'm 26, and my brother right under me, he either turns 18 this month or 19 this month. I don't remember which it is. So we had the same household, and our relationship wasn't really good because our relationship with our mother was so terrible, right? She treated both of us very, she mostly psychologically and emotionally abused me, but she also physically abused him, you know? And so we definitely weren't like tight knit. It was like we got freedom and we both explored it in our own way. I'll talk about my relationship with my brothers in a future episode, and I'll also talk about what my teenage years was like. This is going to be a three-part trilogy on me growing up. The first part was generally growing up mostly from a positive side up until the age of like 12. This one has been like the negative side of my growing up until about the age of 12. And then the next one, we're going to talk about 12 onward, what being a teen was like and how my childhood kind of shaped that experience for me.